Okay, Reddit, I need a sanity check because my world has been spinning for the last 12 hours and I feel like I'm the only one who sees things clearly. Am I the bad guy here? I genuinely need to know. For 3 days, our entire apartment building has been on edge. Dylan, the guy in 3 billion, vanished, just gone. His mail was piling up, his car hadn't moved. I was worried, seriously. He's a quiet guy, keeps to himself, maybe a little strange, but he seemed harmless. I was the one who suggested we call for a wellness check the first day. I was losing sleep thinking about him. Meanwhile, my wife Alina was acting off, so off, it started small. Whispering on the phone in the other room, clicking off the call the second I walked in. Sudden errands she had to run at all hours, coming back smelling like stale coffee and that cheap air freshener they use in laundromats. She was distant, jumpy. My gut, the one that's never steered me wrong, was screaming. You know that feeling, that cold, heavy certainty that something is deeply, fundamentally wrong in my own home. I wasn't trying to follow her last night, I swear to God. I was just driving, trying to clear my head of all the noise, and then I saw her car. It was parked outside the Sleepy Hollow Inn, one of those grim, hourly rate places off the highway. My heart just stopped, and then I saw them, Alina and Dylan. Walking out of room 107. He looked like hell, unshaven, wearing the same clothes from 3 days ago, but he was alive, and he was with my wife. The first thing I felt wasn't relief. It was this hot, white-hot wave of pure humiliation, my wife, in a Fleabag motel with the missing neighbor. The whole sordid picture just clicked into place. But right behind the anger, something else hit me. Fear, real, ice-cold fear. Alina looked exhausted, and she was looking over her shoulder like she was expecting someone. Dylan had this intensity about him. What if this wasn't what it looked like? What if she wasn't there willingly? I mean, the guy disappeared for 3 days. Who knew what he was capable of? My mind started racing. Was she in danger? Had he coerced her? That's when I picked up my phone. I had to do something. I sat there in my car, parked across the street behind a dumpster, the engine off, just watching them. The streetlights made their faces look pale and ghostly. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold my phone. Every instinct screamed at me to peel out of there, go home, pack a bag, and just be gone before she got back. Another part of me wanted to storm across the asphalt and start a fight, make a scene, prove what an absolute fool I'd been made into, but that's not who I am. I'm a rational person, I think things through, so I took a deep breath, and another. I replayed the scene in my head, Dylan's frantic energy, Alina's constant nervous glances. This wasn't a romantic getaway, this was something else, something ugly. My role here wasn't the jealous husband. No, my role was the protector. Alina was my wife, my responsibility. If she was in some kind of trouble, I had to help her, even if she didn't know how to ask for it. The decision crystallized in my mind. It was sharp and clear, like a shard of glass. This was bigger than my hurt feelings. This was about safety. I dialed 911. My voice, when I spoke to the dispatcher, was surprisingly steady. I didn't shout, I didn't accuse. I was a model citizen reporting a concern. Hello, I said, my voice low and even. I have information on the location of a missing person, Dylan Henderson. He's at the Sleepy Hollow Inn off Route 9. The dispatcher asked for my name, my relation. I hesitated for a fraction of a second. I'm a neighbor, I said. He's with my wife. The situation looks volatile. I'm concerned for her safety. Volatile, that was the right word. It covered everything without getting into the messy, embarrassing details of my own emotions. It made the whole thing official, serious. I wasn't a husband acting on a hunch. I was a citizen doing my civic duty. I repeated that to myself over and over as I gave them the room number. This isn't about me, this isn't about jealousy, this is about doing the right thing. I remember hearing something on a true crime podcast once about how Dylan had a messy breakup a few years back. I couldn't recall the details, just a vague impression of shouting matches and a restraining order. Maybe it was his ex-girlfriend's, maybe it was his. The details were fuzzy, but the feeling wasn't. The guy had a dark side, I was sure of it, and my wife was with him in a seedy motel room. Any decent husband would have done the same thing. I wasn't just protecting my marriage, I was potentially saving her life. I hung up the phone feeling righteous. I felt like I had finally taken control of a situation that had been spiraling for days. I had done the right thing, I was sure of it. Edit, okay, so the cops came, and let me tell you, it did not go down the way I thought it would. 2 squad cars pulled in, lights off, real quiet and professional. I stayed in my car thinking they'd handle it, secure Alina, and then I could drive over and be the relieved, worried husband. But that's not what happened. They knocked on the door of room 107, and after a minute Alina opened it. She wasn't scared, she looked annoyed, exasperated even. They separated them. One officer took Dylan aside and another, a woman with a tired face, started talking to Alina. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could see my wife's body language. She kept pointing back at the room, then shaking her head, her arms crossed tight against her chest. She looked angry, not scared, not relieved, angry. After about 20 minutes of this, one of the officers walked over to my car. He tapped on the window with his flashlight and I nearly jumped out of my skin. I rolled it down. "You're the caller." "Marcus?" he asked, his voice flat. I nodded. He just stared at me for a long moment. "You can go home, sir. The situation is under control." "That's it." "No, thank you for the tip. No, your wife is safe now." Just dismissal. And then Alina saw me. As the cops were wrapping up, she looked across the parking lot and her eyes locked onto mine. The look she gave me, Jesus. It wasn't gratitude, it was pure undiluted fury, cold as ice. She didn't even come over to me. She got into her own car and peeled out of the parking lot without a single backward glance. So I came home to an empty apartment, and now I'm reading some of the early comments here. A lot of you are saying I should have talked to her first, that I overreacted. You don't get it. You weren't there, you didn't see the way they looked. And you don't know Dylan, that guy, there's just something off about him. He has this weird, intense stare, and I've heard things. Whispers in the building about his temper. You can't take chances with people like that, not when your family's safety is on the line. I had to make a call, and I made it based on the information I had. I chose to be safe rather than sorry. How does that make me the bad guy? I sat in that silent apartment for what felt like an eternity, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. Alina wasn't answering my calls or texts. My righteous anger from the motel parking lot was curdling into a sour mix of confusion and dread. I kept replaying the scene with the cops. Their indifference, Alina's rage, it didn't add up. My narrative, the one where I was the hero, was starting to fray at the edges. Just as I was about to pour myself a whiskey I definitely didn't need, there was a knock at the door. It wasn't Alina, it was the female officer from the motel, the one who had spoken to my wife. Her name tag read Gable. "Mr. Collins?" she asked. She looked even more tired up close. "Your wife asked me to stop by. She's staying with her sister tonight. She wanted to make sure you understood the situation was resolved." "Resolved? What situation?" "I'm the one who called you. Is she okay? Did he threaten her?" My voice was louder than I intended, a little desperate. Officer Gable sighed, a deep, weary sound that seemed to come from the bottom of her soul. She looked past me into my apartment, then met my eyes. It wasn't a look of accusation, it was something worse, it was pity. "Sir," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "Your wife is fine, she was never in any danger." She paused, and for a second I thought she was going to leave. But then she leaned against the doorjamb, a small, almost imperceptible gesture of concession. "Look, it's been a long night for everyone, but you should know your wife is an incredible friend. Mr. Henderson is damn lucky to have a social worker like her in his corner." The world tilted. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. I must have looked as stunned as I felt because I just stared at her, my mouth hanging open. "Social worker," the words came out as a strangled whisper. It was like she'd spoken in a foreign language. The two words didn't belong in the same sentence as Alina and Motel and Dylan. They were from a different story entirely. My story didn't have a social worker in it. "She didn't tell you," Gable's expression softened slightly. "She's a case manager for a domestic violence outreach program. Has been for years." I tried to process this. Alina, a social worker, she worked in administration for a nonprofit, that's what she'd always told me. The title was vague enough that I'd never questioned it. My mind was scrambling, trying to fit this new, impossible piece of information into the puzzle I had so carefully constructed. It didn't fit, it shattered the whole damn thing. I don't understand," I stammered. Officer Gable just gave me another one of those pitying looks. "Maybe you should ask her about it," she said, her voice devoid of any judgment, which somehow made it sting even more. "Have a good night, Mr. Collins." She turned and walked away, leaving me standing in my doorway, the cold night air rushing in, feeling like the biggest idiot on the face of the planet. She came home the next afternoon. The moment Alina walked through the door, the silence in the apartment became heavy, suffocating. She didn't look at me. She just walked to the kitchen, placed her keys on the counter with a soft click, and poured herself a glass of water. I stood there, my heart pounding in my chest, 100 questions and accusations swirling in my head. But the image of Officer Gable's pitying face was burned into my mind. I had to know. "A social worker," I finally managed to say. "Alina, what the hell is going on?" She took a long, slow sip of water before finally turning to face me. The anger from last night was gone. In its place was a profound, bone-deep weariness that scared me more than her fury ever could. "I'm a case manager, Marcus," she said, her voice flat and even. "I work with victims of domestic abuse. Specifically male victims. It's a specialized field. The men I work with are often too ashamed or too scared to go through the usual channels." She explained it all in that same detached tone, as if she were giving a presentation at work. The secretive phone calls were with clients, shelters, legal aid. The late-night errands were emergency relocations. The smell of cheap coffee was because she spent half her life in hospital waiting rooms and police stations. She kept her work life separate from her home life for a reason, for her own safety and for the privacy of her clients. It was a boundary she never, ever crossed. Then she told me about Dylan. It wasn't a messy breakup he'd had, it was a nightmare. His ex-girlfriend was violent, unstable, and vindictive. After he finally left her, she started stalking him, slashing his tires, calling his boss with wild accusations, threatening him online. He'd gotten a restraining order, but it was just a piece of paper. 2 weeks ago, she'd broken into his apartment while he was at work and destroyed everything he owned. He was terrified. He came to Alina's organization as a last resort. He didn't vanish, Marcus, she said, her voice finally cracking with a sliver of emotion. He was hiding, I was moving him. The motel was a temporary safe house, a place for him to stay for a few nights while I arranged for a bed at a long-term shelter in another county. We were there finalizing the paperwork when you made that call. The blood drained from my face. Every single piece of evidence I had collected, every suspicious glance, every whispered phone call, it all reassembled itself into a completely different picture. A picture in which I was not the hero, I wasn't even a bystander, I was the villain. Why didn't you just tell me? I whispered, the question sounding pathetic even to my own ears. Alina let out a short, bitter laugh. Tell you what, that my quiet neighbor was being terrorized, that I was helping him escape, would you have believed me? Or would your imagination have run wild anyway? You've never liked Dylan, you've made comments about him for years. You saw what you wanted to see, Marcus. You saw a sleazy affair because it was easier than seeing the truth. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw the full extent of the damage I had done. You saw a betrayal, so you decided to betray me. Final update, it's been a week. The apartment is so quiet now you can hear the pipes groaning in the walls. Alina is still at her sister's. We've texted a few times. The exchanges are civil, sterile, like two strangers coordinating the logistics of a shared storage unit. The consequences of what I did there worse than I could have imagined. My 911 call, my righteous act of protection, created a public record, a police report. And in this city, those things are shockingly easy for a determined person to access. Dylan's ex-girlfriend found him. She didn't even have to do much digging. A friend of a friend who works in the courthouse basement was all it took. She found out the location of the motel. By the time the police report was filed and processed, Dylan and Alina were long gone, but the ex knew something I didn't. Alina's organization sometimes used that specific motel for emergency placements. She started watching it. Not all the time, just driving by, looking for familiar cars. 2 days ago, Alina was there meeting another client. The ex saw her car, she waited. When the client, a terrified young man who had just left his abusive partner, stepped outside for a smoke, she confronted him, screaming Dylan's name. She made a huge scene. The client, already traumatized, panicked and fled. He's now back with his abuser, too scared to seek help again. Dylan is gone. Alina had to pull every string she had to get him moved to a shelter 3 states away, under a different name. He had to leave his job, his life, everything he knew, all because I couldn't control my own jealousy. My actions didn't just expose him, they blew up the entire support system he was relying on. They put other vulnerable people at risk. Alina told me this over the phone last night. Her voice wasn't angry anymore, it was just empty, hollowed out. The most important thing I do, Marcus, is build trust, she said. I create safety where there is none. In one night, you took a sledgehammer to both of those things. Not just for Dylan, but for me and for my work. She told me she needs space, she needs to think. But I know what that means. I heard it in the silence between her words. How can she ever trust me again? How can she come home to a man whose first instinct, when faced with something he doesn't understand, is to burn everything to the ground? I keep thinking about that moment in the car, my thumb hovering over the call button. I told myself I was protecting my family, but that was a lie. I was protecting my ego. And in the end, that righteous, selfish act didn't save my family. It guaranteed I would lose it. I'm the bad guy. I finally see it. I just wish I had seen it sooner.